the way you've handled appointing the subcommittee and letting us go through all the testimony. But for those of you who are not on the subcommittee, I think it's important to hear a few facts. Everything the Senator from Horry stated is exactly what happened as it relates to the bill. But the House bill, as it comes to us, redefines abortion. That is, we've had a long-standing definition of abortion in this state. For the purposes of this section, it redefines abortion and gives it a new definition, and in that context does several things. It does not make any exceptions for the morning after pill or the IUD in its definition of abortion. It does not include an exception for rape and incest. It criminalizes doctors, something that the medical community is strongly against. In fact, most of the medical folks who've weighed in, the doctors from South Carolina, from both of our universities, the American Association of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, they're all against this bill because of the potential that's out there. And so let me explain what that is. This bill would affect probably around 30 people a year. We're talking about abortions that are happening week 20 to 22. There are very few of those, but they are among the most heart-wrenching decisions that these women have to make, because at that point in time, at 20 weeks into a pregnancy, most, if not all, of these women are committed to having a child. They want this child. But it's at that time that medical technology allows for the most accurate ultrasound to be taken. And it's when that ultrasound is taken at around that time that oftentimes not often, I'm telling you, last year in South Carolina, it was about 30 people, around 3 a month, okay? But these women at that point in time were able, in consultation with their doctors, in almost every case, to see some terribly wrong with the child, that the child was going to be born without a brain, the child was going to be born with some severe issue that was going to cause it to be incompatible with life. They may be able to carry it to term and go through a birth, but the child was going to die within a matter of hours. Many of us feel like these women who have this hard decision to make should be able to make this decision and get on with their lives. And if they want a child, get pregnant again. But this bill would require them to actually carry a child that they know is going to die to full term. And so what we have tried to accomplish here in the subcommittee amendment is to say that if they, well, let me go one step further. Once you get that ultrasound and you want to do a further test called an amniocentesis, you really can't do that until around the 21st or 22nd week. If this bill passes, that's too late. It's too late to get the results of that test. And once you find out the results of that test actually are confirmatory that, in fact, the child is going to have something that's incompatible with life, it's just if we pass this bill, it's going to be too late. We are not talking about the vast majority of abortions in this state. I know that many of you have very sincere and heartfelt beliefs, and you're against it, and I respect that. But y'all are not trying to outlaw abortion. What you really are doing is making an effort to make a change at those abortions that actually might be the ones that make, if you would ever consider, I know most of you never would, but if you would ever consider that there was a reason to have one, it's these very few, where it's obvious that the child is incompatible with life or is going to be born with some severe abnormality that will, and the definition that the Senator from Horry is prepared to submit will say, not only does it have to have a genetical or chromosome anomaly, but that anomaly has to be so severe in the medical opinion of the doctor that that child will not be able to have independent and sustained life. You know, you can keep a human on a machine for a long time, but the child, and we don't know in how much pain, though. And that's one of the ironies of this bill, is this is aimed at pain, and yet the end result may be that these 20 or 30 people that we're talking about every year in South Carolina are going to be born in severe pain and for 6 hours and then die. So what we've tried to do in the amendment is to go back and just say, look, we're not trying to, this bill never was, and they've represented, everybody represented, this bill is not a personhood bill, this bill is not a contraception, well, then let's just say so. Let's just say this thing is not aimed at the IUD, it's not aimed at the morning after pill. So I put that back in, or we put that back in, the subcommittee adopted that. It has been the law of this state ever since we've had to deal with this, and rape and incest have been exceptions. And so we put that back in. And the only reason we are dealing with the additional exception of a fetal abnormality is because of the time that medical science will allow mothers to know what's truly going on to make this decision. We wouldn't be having this debate, I do not believe, if medical science would allow a woman at week 8 to know everything she knows at week 20. That just isn't, we don't have that technology yet. And so at week 20 is that critical time when you actually find out that something might be wrong of a very significant nature, and then you've got to make a tough decision. And I'll tell you, by week 20, as I said before, these women are committed to having this child. And we heard testimony from some women we had women who were in this position, and some decided to have an abortion, and some decided not to. And every one of them was comfortable with their own decision. And they were in the same room together, telling us that they faced the same choice, and one went one way and one went another. But each woman that testified was comfortable with the decision she made based upon the medical evidence that was available to her. And I think that's all we're trying to preserve in these very, very few cases, is the ability of a woman in consultation with her family, with her medical professionals, with her faith and spiritual leaders, to make a decision that she thinks is right, not only for herself, but for her family. Many of these, in fact, I think well, not everyone, but many of the women we heard from, or several of the women we heard from, had other children. They had to take that into account too. You know, and two of them we heard from went on to have other children. These are not women who don't like children or don't want children. This is a very, very tough decision for them, and one that I wouldn't want to have to make, but it's one that they're entitled to be able to make for themselves. And so I would urge you, and I know, as I say, I know that everybody who speaks, votes, and acts today is doing so sincerely. I don't doubt that for a second. And we all have maybe strong feelings about what's right and what's wrong in this case. But I just want you to know that what you're doing is you're not really changing a huge number of cases of abortion in South Carolina. Just statistically, at that point in time, most women who were going to opt for an elective abortion or abortion that they wanted have done so. They just have. It just is that by week 20, I mean, think about it, that's 5 months, virtually 5 months into a pregnancy. These women are committed to having this child when they all of a sudden are confronted with horrible medical information based on medical science that's only available at about that time in their pregnancy. And some accept the science and say, in spite of that, I'm going to carry this child to term. And some accept the science and say, this makes no sense for me and my family to endure 4 more months of a pregnancy that's going to result in a death. I want to move on with my life, heal from this pregnancy, and get pregnant again, which virtually every one of them did. I would just urge you, and I know that we're going to have to take this vote first, but I'd urge you to vote against tabling subcommittee amendment so we can at least get to the subcommittee amendment, because if you want to get a bill out, I think the only way we're going to get a bill out is one that's got rape and incest in it, one that's got some, and look, these other states that are mentioned, these are some pretty conservative states, okay? Texas and some of these states, they all basically have this exception. Not all of them now, but most of them have an exception for this fetal anomaly, because it's recognized that it really is a critical time in the pregnancy in which what you're saying in reality is this. If you cut off the right to make that choice at week 20, women of means will make that choice. They'll just go to New York or North Carolina or Virginia or somewhere that can happen. It's women without means. It's the poor women of this state who are going to be required to every day for 4 months carry a child that they know is basically going to die as soon as it's born. And to what end you put them to that suffering during those 4 months, I don't know. But that's a decision that they should be able to make. And if they want to make the decision that they believe in miracles and they don't believe in the science, or they have some doubt about it, they can make that choice too. And that's the testimony we heard. Some women made that choice, and others made the other choice, and they sat in the same room, and they listened and cried with each other, but they all felt like they made the right choice for themselves. And that's all we're asking to preserve, is that choice. So I'd ask you to table when the senator from Lawrence moves to table the subcommittee amendment, I'd urge you to vote against that.
Thank you. Another member of the subcommittee